13 Golden Age Hollywood stars who were shockingly foolish. The shimmering fantasy of Hollywood's golden age sold the world on flawless glamour. Actors weren't simply skilled, they were treated like divine beings with brains to match their looks. Hidden behind the cameras and rehearsed sound bites was a harsher reality. Several of film's brightest legends showed an alarming shortage of simple logic and awareness. The powerful studio system that manufactured stardom often valued appearance above intellect. Do you understand what's going on? That's the sense it gave. Executives didn't want thinkers, they wanted faces that obeyed, admitted one MGM insider. Brains were considered a drawback since it encouraged questions and rebellion. Now we're revealing 13 classic stars whose mental shortcomings were masked by image making. From performers who blanked on the easiest lines to 1. Judy Garland, a prodigy with the heart of a child. Her performances glowed with remarkable sensitivity and depth. Yet co-workers insisted Garland often showed a startling lack of general knowledge. She had a gift for emotional expression, recalled one technician. But off-stage, she revealed knowledge gaps that left people stunned. She once earnestly wondered if Australia was in Europe. Her weak schooling, starting with her signing to MGM at 13, played a big part. Teachers hired by the studio prioritized rules over genuine learning. They were box checkers, not educators, one insider admitted. By stardom, Judy struggled even to compose a basic paragraph. These strange gaps haunted her career. On Easter Parade, she reportedly asked director Charles Walters when Easter actually took place. When told it was spring, she seemed puzzled why it wasn't with Christmas in December. Numbers were another weak spot. Garland failed to grasp even simple finances. A manager once explained that 10% of $100,000 was $10,000, but she never understood. Most troubling was her trusting nature. You could claim standing on one foot while drinking grapefruit juice kept you young, and she'd accept it, a makeup artist said. Her childlike faith made her a target for handlers and doctors who fed her pills. That blind trust ultimately fueled the addictions that ended her story. 2. Errol Flynn, the adventurer with nothing in the sheath. On screen, he dazzled in Captain Blood and Robin Hood, quick with wit and sword. Off-screen, the difference between role and reality couldn't have been greater. Flynn knew shockingly little about anything, a script supervisor revealed. He once couldn't even point out Europe on a world map. Though born in Tasmania and raised partly in England, his schooling was poor. After being expelled from several institutions, he left education unfinished. What stood out most was his lack of curiosity to fill those gaps. Director Michael Curtis grew famous for watering down Flynn's lines. Scripts were stripped of long words, not for pronunciation, but comprehension. This led to constant issues on set. Flynn often emphasized the wrong words because he didn't understand the script. We'd redo scenes endlessly since he'd stress the wrong syllable, recalled a recordist. Even his autobiography, My Wicked, Wicked Ways, required a ghostwriter. The collaborator admitted he had to reshape rambling, incoherent anecdotes into order. Often, Flynn couldn't even recall events he had just described. The great irony is that while his roles showcased sharp-minded heroes, Flynn himself was nothing but. The actor famous for playing sharp-minded roles once supposedly asked a filmmaker if New York was located in California. After being corrected, he then wondered aloud if California might be inside New York. His logic was, if you just exist, you don't really need to perform. According to him, acting wasn't something he did, it was something he simply was. Number 3. Tony Curtis, Hollywood's striking leading man. Curtis carved out a career with his good looks and natural charm, but beneath the polished performances was someone whose lack of understanding shocked even tolerant colleagues. Tony could recite lines flawlessly, but often didn't grasp the meaning, said a director in the 60s. He'd deliver his part word perfect, then glance over and ask, "What exactly did I just say?" much like an elegant parrot. Curtis had left school early when he dropped out of high school. During The Vikings, he apparently asked Kirk Douglas if Vikings were actual historical people or make-believe creatures like dragons. Kirk assumed Tony was joking, a crew member remembered. Once he realized Curtis was earnest, Douglas used breaks to teach him elementary history. Curtis was stunned when he discovered Vikings weren't fairy tales. Geography gave him just as much trouble. While making The Great Race, he routinely mixed up countries and continents. Director Blake Edwards reportedly had to point out again and again that traveling from America to France required crossing an ocean, as Curtis kept asking which highways they'd drive on. Unlike stars who quietly concealed their weak knowledge, Curtis would voice extremely simple questions in front of the entire team. On a USO trip, he asked if Japan belonged to China. When told it didn't, he followed by asking if China belonged to Japan. His money choices revealed the same lack of judgment. Even with millions earned, Curtis often lost fortunes on impulsive decisions. One manager recalled, he once threw $50,000 into a plan to ship sand to Hawaii because a party guest claimed the islands were running out of it. He never even asked to see details. Yet despite all this, Curtis enjoyed a long career. His magnetic presence and emotional instincts balanced his lack of book smarts, keeping audiences attached even when he barely understood his own dialogue. That was Tony Curtis, 24 hours a day. Number 4. Jane Mansfield, the blonde bombshell with dangerous misconceptions. Mansfield's reputation as the ultimate dumb blonde has made many believe her cluelessness was staged. The truth was more complicated. She mixed genuine learning with shocking gaps in knowledge. Jane was the oddest blend of brilliance and naivete I'd ever seen, admitted a director. She could boast fluency in 5 languages and claim a genius-level IQ, then ask if the sun and moon were simply the same body viewed at different hours. Unlike others on this list, Mansfield had attended Southern Methodist University and UCLA. Still, colleagues remarked that her understanding rarely matched her credentials. She'd casually reference philosophers or great books, a writer remembered, but if you pressed her, it became clear she'd only memorized lines without context. On one occasion, she seriously credited a Nietzsche quote to Betty Boop. Her grasp of science was equally fragile. A makeup artist once recalled, Jane asked if drinking hydrogen peroxide would turn her insides blonde. When I warned her it was dangerous, she seemed shocked and admitted she had sipped some the week before. What muddled people's judgment was her deliberate use of the dumb blonde act. She knew this persona attracted headlines, so she often exaggerated her confusion. The problem, explained a publicist, was that Mansfield blurred the line between the performance and her own life. She'd play clueless during interviews, but then repeat the same errors privately with no cameras around. Even with her sizable paychecks, she constantly made ruinous money mistakes. Her business manager remembered she couldn't tell gross from net income. She'd cash a $50,000 check, instantly spend $75,000, and sincerely wonder why she was broke.
Beware, beware, beware of the big green dragon that sits on your door.
Bela Lugosi, horror's iconic yet bewildered outsider. Lugosi etched himself into film history as Count Dracula, exuding aristocratic menace on screen. Lugosi's polished performances gave the impression of sharp intelligence. In truth, the gap between his on-screen brilliance and his real-life struggles was enormous. A director from the 1940s said Lugosi's problems went far deeper than just struggling with English. Even when instructions were explained in Hungarian, he failed to grasp the simplest ideas. Unless storylines were broken down step by step as if to a child, he couldn't keep track of the plot. His limited English, which barely advanced despite decades in America, made his struggles all the more obvious. Many of his lines were learned by sound alone, without knowing their meaning. One Universal sound technician recalled, he could deliver lines with that commanding voice, but if you asked him to rephrase or explain the meaning, he had no idea. What set Lugosi apart from actors battling language issues was his inability to grasp ideas that had nothing to do with words. A producer admitted, "We once spent hours explaining why a dead character couldn't return to the story. He kept saying, 'But I am Dracula. Dracula cannot die.'" His blurring himself with his roles extended into poor real-world choices. Lugosi's agent recalled, he once sold away merchandising rights for only $1,000. When the products later earned millions, he couldn't understand why no further money was owed, even after being told countless times about the one-time fee. His private beliefs revealed equally troubling gaps. According to a makeup artist, he believed certain object arrangements protected him from spirits. One day, he refused to act because furniture formed what he called a death pattern. Once we nudged a chair, he immediately relaxed. Unable to navigate contracts, finances, or changing tastes, the actor who embodied one of cinema's most cunning villains became out of step with Hollywood, ultimately working with Ed Wood on films remembered as some of the worst ever created. Now we turn to George Raft, Hollywood's tough guy who couldn't keep track of the story. Raft brought real gangster flavor to his roles, cementing his place as one of the screen's top mobsters. But behind that gritty authenticity was an actor whose reputation for confusion spread across the industry. "He couldn't follow scripts," said a Warner Brothers director. "Not complicated ideas, basic plot points. We explained every scene right before shooting, as if he'd never seen the script before." Raft, raised in Hell's Kitchen, had dropped out of school early. While many actors of his era shared limited schooling, Raft stood out for lacking the wit to make up for it. Reading was his greatest weakness. One screenwriter said bluntly, George was basically illiterate. He could spot his character's name and a few common words, but not much else. His lines were read aloud to him, and he learned them only by repeating them. This slowed down production significantly. A Warner Brothers producer admitted, "We gave extra rehearsal time on Raft's films because he required constant verbal explanation. If a script was altered, chaos followed. A single new line meant relearning entire scenes since he couldn't process the updated pages." His struggles weren't just with reading, they extended to logic. While making Background to Danger in 1943, Raft never understood that his character was supposed to be a double agent. A crew member remembered, "We kept saying he was pretending to work for one side while actually with another. After an hour, he asked, 'So which side am I on?' We ended up simplifying the part." His most famous blunder came when he refused the lead in The Maltese Falcon. Bogart took the role, and it became iconic. Raft later said he turned it down to avoid another gangster part. But insiders insisted the real reason was simpler. He just couldn't make sense of the story. After 3 attempts to explain it, he dismissed it as nonsense and passed. Despite all this, Raft managed to survive in Hollywood by sticking to simple gangster roles that suited him best. Unlike stars who stretched past their own ability, Raft stayed within his lane and avoided characters requiring depth or complexity. Her golden curls and striking figure turned her into one of the defining sex symbols of the 1940s. Beneath the polished veneer of glamour, however, was someone whose lack of intellect continually startled her colleagues. A director who collaborated with Lana on several films admitted she often failed to grasp even the simplest ideas. An entire day was once spent attempting to make her see why her character would be devastated by her husband's affair. She kept repeating, "Why should it matter what he does when she's not there?" It wasn't a statement of modern thinking. She truly failed to comprehend emotional betrayal. Turner's formal schooling was extremely limited. Discovered as a teenager at a soda fountain, she was quickly absorbed into Hollywood with little education afterward. MGM, aware of both her appeal and her shortcomings, placed her with a secretary whose duties went beyond scheduling. She handled reading, writing, and even arithmetic. According to one former MGM staffer, the studio understood that Lana was practically unable to read or write well. Her dialogue had to be broken down into color-coded lines, with long words replaced by short ones. Despite that, she frequently lost track of the storyline itself. Geography was one of her weakest subjects. During filming of The Postman Always Rings Twice, she once asked if Acapulco was part of Italy. When told it was in Mexico, she wondered aloud if she could drive there from California for the weekend, showing no awareness of the border or distance. Even more striking was her confusion about money, despite the fortune she earned. A business manager in the 1950s shared that she signed for $5,000 a week, but asked if she'd be handed that amount daily or if she needed to wait until Friday. When told it was a weekly figure, she insisted, "So that's $5,000 every single day," unable to understand the math. This lack of financial sense led to her constant monetary troubles despite massive earnings. She repeatedly agreed to contracts without comprehension, invested poorly on advice from casual acquaintances, and spent endlessly as though her income had no limits. What kept Turner in demand was her undeniable presence on screen and her willingness to take direction. Unlike actors who argued with filmmakers, she followed instructions faithfully, making her easy to work with even if explanations took extra time. As one cameraman put it, Lana might not know why her character was heartbroken, but she could deliver tears on cue while looking radiant. In the end, that was enough to sustain her stardom. Mickey Rooney, however, was a very different case. A performer with boundless energy but little grasp on reality. His career astonishingly stretched across 9 decades, from child roles to senior parts. His lively turns in the Andy Hardy films and musicals with Judy Garland made him the #1 box office star of the late 1930s. Yet behind that immense talent was a man with a fragile grip on logic and a distorted view of the world. A director in the 1950s noted that Mickey existed in a make-believe world of his own. This wasn't just arrogance. He truly seemed unable to tell apart reality from the version he wished to believe. If told something unpleasant, he simply ignored it. That denial extended to basic facts of his profession. Despite decades in the industry, Rooney often revealed glaring misunderstandings about filmmaking itself. One production manager recalled that even in his 60s, he didn't realize movies were shot out of sequence. When the ending was filmed first, he'd panic, asking how the audience could follow if the story was told backwards. His financial awareness was equally absent. Though he earned millions, he declared bankruptcy more than once due to total confusion about money. His accountant in the 1970s remembered trying to explain that monthly bills like mortgages had to be paid whether or not he was working. Rooney would ask, "But if I didn't earn anything that month, why should I pay?" He also struggled with geography and history. During a USO tour in the 1940s, he once asked if Japan and Germany were the same nation since the US was fighting both. When another entertainer explained the alliances of World War II, Rooney grew annoyed and insisted it had to be a single enemy since multiple foes were too confusing. What complicated his reputation was that his acting skills were undeniable. On camera, he could show emotional depth and deliver flawless comedic timing. Yet this clashed sharply with his real-life lack of understanding. A co-star in the 1960s remarked, "Mickey could play a character going through nuanced emotions, then step off set and ask which way California was while standing right in Los Angeles." Rooney's greatest weakness showed in how blind he was to his own fading career. Even in his later years, reduced to supporting roles, he spoke confidently about leading projects that never appeared. A casting agent in the 1980s remembered Mickey spinning tales of meetings with executives that never occurred and roles that didn't exist. He wasn't trying to deceive, he seemed truly to believe those fantasies. Still, Rooney's energy and raw skill gave him longevity, even as his mental gaps earned him a reputation as Hollywood's most exhausting star. Old Connor was merciless. 9. William Holden, sharp on screen, shallow in life. Holden carried an aura of intelligence in films like Sunset Boulevard, Stalag 17, and Network. His roles radiated insight, sophistication, and depth. Away from the camera, though, the difference in his intellect was striking. A director recalled, "Bill could handle elegant dialogue perfectly, but once filming ended, his questions showed he hadn't absorbed its meaning. It was as though he could channel brilliance without ever having it himself." His schooling at Pasadena Junior College suggested a decent background, but colleagues stressed his limited grasp of ideas. His problem wasn't memory, it was the inability to connect thoughts. One writer explained, "Bill could remember facts but couldn't see the bigger picture." While working on Bridge on the River Kwai, he thought it was simply a jailbreak adventure, missing the clear anti-war theme. This literal thinking frustrated directors. Billy Wilder resorted to doodling little cartoons to explain subtext. On Network, Sidney Lumet had to spell out moral conflict as "bad woman, good wife, you feel guilty." Financially, Holden made equally poor choices. He gave up U.S. citizenship to avoid taxes, not realizing he was trading away greater financial security. His manager recalled endless attempts to make him understand, but he never could. Alcohol worsened everything. By Network, he often required guidance for the simplest scene. Still, his natural charisma kept him in demand. As one cinematographer said, "The camera records presence, not IQ." And Holden had presence to burn, even when he missed the meaning of his lines. (10) Joan Blondell, the witty blonde who couldn't count change. Blondell lit up more than 100 films across 5 decades with her sassy, street-smart characters. Her quick repartee made her seem razor-sharp. Off-screen, insiders revealed her real-life intellect was far from her screen image. A Warner Brothers director said, "Joan's fast delivery made her sound brilliant, but off-camera her gaps in knowledge were glaring." She once asked if Abraham Lincoln was real or invented for a film. Having left school young, her limitations stretched beyond education into an inability to think abstractly. A writer recalled her failing to grasp why her character should discuss world affairs, insisting romance was the only topic worth speaking of. Her geography was shockingly poor. On My Little Chickadee, she asked if Chicago was near London because it was east of California. Losing patience, she dismissed it with, "As long as I know the bedroom, that's all the geography I need." Still, within her niche, she was a genius. She outwitted censors with clever wordplay and negotiated strong contracts, even if she didn't grasp economics. Her distrust of banks led her to keep piles of cash hidden at home. May thrived because she built a world where her limitations never mattered. As one producer said, she didn't need to know geography, she invented her own world, and audiences happily lived in it. That world was hers and hers alone.